Sports delivery systems are varying types of developmental structures that are set in place to provide young athletes with a clear pathway through to future successes. The delivery systems of sport are aimed, in the younger age groups, at mass participation, following a sport for all approach. These programs look to include the maximum number of participants and lower the competitive nature so that the emphasis is purely on being involved. These programs are, a lot of the time, run in a gala day or round-robin competition format to maximise participation time, and, if a result is to be achieved, it is done so quickly. As participants become older, the focus of the delivery system turns to player development and maximising potential opportunities for success. Teams such as state and national representative are selected for those who are deemed talented enough to participate against those with similar abilities, and ultimately progressing their sporting futures. Rugby union in Australia has experienced significant participation growth across the last 20 years. As recently as 2014, the national participation rate rose by 12% on the previous year, with 687,488 men, women, and children participating across Australia. As a result of the rise in participation, rugby's governing body, the Australian Rugby Union, has developed various programs aimed at participation from the younger age groups. From Sport for All programs such as Try Rugby, aimed at maximum participation and minimal competition, through to regional, state, and national representative programs for those who wish to progress their rugby. The ARU have been actively promoting and pursuing rugby at a grassroots level. Young rugby players in Australia now have a clear pathway from their junior or school rugby programs through to their respective state representative programs and into the Australian schoolboys at an under-18 level, the Junior World Cup at an under-20 level, and on to the NRC or Super Rugby, through to the most elite Wallaby level. While not every elite player makes every age grade representative team, and not every Wallaby has previously played in the Australian schoolboys or under-20s, the pathways to Wallaby success in Australian rugby are evident in the current crop of Super Rugby and Wallaby players, as their skill sets were taught and their abilities were recognised through the ARU grassroots programs in their youth. Some of Australia's current best players have played at least 1 year in the Australian schoolboys, including Curly Beale and Quade Cooper in 2005 and 2006, James O'Connor and Matt Tamua, Australian schoolboys of 2007, and current New South Wales Waratahs and Wallabies captain Michael Hooper, who was an Australian schoolboy in 2008. The pathway as outlined in this slide shows step by step the ways into success through the Australian rugby system. The Navy side, on the right, shows the respective junior representative programs, through the Australian schoolboys and 20s, and then into senior club rugby and on to professional rugby environments. While the white side, on the left, outlines the pathways for those not selected in their respective state sides. It shows that no matter your junior successes, you can still maximise your potential as a rugby player in the Australian rugby system. Perhaps one of Australia's most well-known rugby players of the current era, David Pocock is another prime example of the Australian rugby pathways and delivery systems that are now available to juniors. Born in Gweru, Zimbabwe, on April 23, 1988, Pocock has been involved in professional rugby at a super and international level since his final year of school, after signing his first contract with the Western Force in their inaugural 2006 Super Rugby campaign. His autobiography, Open Side, My Journey to the Rugby World Cup, was released in 2011 ahead of the Rugby World Cup in New Zealand. As the title suggests, Pocock outlines his journey from the farming town of Gweru through his family's migration to Australia as a young boy, into his time playing junior rugby in Australia, and into the professional rugby and World Cup environments that we see him today. David was born into a farming family in Zimbabwe, and he states in his book that his earliest Rugby World Cup memories are from his time in Zimbabwe. Watching the 1995 World Cup opener between South Africa and Australia, Pocock idolised the South African players, and it was this delivery system, through media exposure, that his original rugby interest began. While attending Midlands Christian School in Gweru, David began playing rugby with the Grade 3 Colts side. However, his skills were quickly noticed and he was progressed into the Grade 5 Colts from this early age. He is pictured here playing rugby in his younger days in Zimbabwe. As a result of the land distribution project during the height of political unrest in Zimbabwe, the Pocock family farm was taken from them, and they were forced to seek refuge elsewhere, eventually migrating to Brisbane, Australia, where David attended a rugby school in the Anglican Church Grammar School. In his book, David says, "All I knew was that it was an all-boys school that did well in rugby, and had won the rugby and rowing premierships the year Dad visited. That excited me, but at the time I had no idea how it would shape my first few years of life in Australia, nor how it would ultimately help me achieve many of my goals in rugby." Looking back on his time at Churchie, as the school is widely known, David credits a lot of his successes to the rugby program that the school held. The delivery of rugby within the school, even in the younger ages, is among the best in Australia, and this only benefited his abilities as a rugby player. In 2003, David was playing in the Churchie Under-15 A team as a fullback. In that season, the Churchie First 15 boasted players such as Carmichael Hunt, who was to be a future NRL, AFL and rugby union star, and they went through the season undefeated, as did Pocock's Under-15s. That same year, he also made the first of his representative teams during his time in Australia, the Brisbane Metropolitan East Under-15s, playing on the wing. This is the early stages of the Queensland Development Trials, and is one of the delivery systems that the Queensland Rugby Union offer, through the Australian rugby system, to identify potential talent at a young age. Pocock continued to train and play at Churchie, but after injuring his knee in his Under-16 year, only managed to play a few games that season. He was still invited to the Queensland Under-16 state trials and was recommended by Churchie to trial in the back row, the position he now plays professionally. After making the Queensland Under-16s in the back row, he then spent the whole summer of 2004-2005 training for the Churchie First 15 as an open side flanker. In doing so, he learnt the finer intricacies of playing the position and was able to develop the skill set that would later aid him in realising his professional rugby ambitions. Here, David's pictured with some of the Churchie First 15, second from the left in the front row, and fellow Wallaby, Quade Cooper, is second from the right in the back row, showing the depth Churchie had in that season. With the prestigious nature of the Greater Public Schools, or GPS competition in Queensland, Super Rugby Scouts are very often searching for talented players in the respective First 15s, and in David's year it was no different. So, when the newly formed Western Force franchise called and offered him an apprentice contract for his first year out of school, he jumped at the opportunity. The development that being in a professional environment could offer was invaluable, and it was this apprentice contract that allowed him to realise his professional goals and put him in his first professional rugby environment. Although, later that year, he was offered an academy contract with the already established Queensland Reds franchise, the development that a full-time environment at the Force could offer compared to the part-time academy environment was far greater, and so he officially signed on as a Western Force Super Rugby player. Later that year, Pocock realised the ambitions of all schoolboy rugby players, and, after being selected in the Queensland Schoolboys, he was further selected to represent Australia in the Schoolboys Tour of Europe. The premier level of schoolboy rugby in Australia, the benefits of being in this team are evident in the crop of players who have gone on to make professional rugby a career from the 2005 Australian Schoolboys. Of the players who toured, 14 of them have gone on to make further international appearances for the Australian national team. This is a testament to the increased focus on youth rugby by the ARU, and another example of how representative youth programs can lead to developed success at the later stages of a player's career. While Pocock was limited to training only during his first season with the Force, due to the ARU's under-18 rule, the lessons he learned while playing for the team about what it is like to be in a professional environment and what dedication and discipline it takes to thrive at the highest level proved invaluable. He went on to play in the Australian Under-19s team for the World Championship in Dubai that year, and shortly after that tour, flew to South Africa with the Force, where he made his first Super Rugby debut against the Sharks in Durban, as pictured. The following year, David was named captain of the Australian Under-20s for their 2008 Junior World Cup campaign, in the highest level of international age grade rugby available. In the same year, he went on to be selected for the Wallabies and their spring tour of Europe, 6 years to the day that the Pococks arrived in Australia. On that tour, he made his debut against the All Blacks in the Bledisloe Cup match in Hong Kong, further playing games against the Barbarians and Italy on tour. David now lives and plays his rugby in Canberra with the ACT Brumbies. He has since gone on to make 79 Super Rugby caps, 69 of which were with the Force, and 46 international caps with the Wallabies. Outside of rugby, he runs a charity, 80-20 Vision, assisting communities in his native Zimbabwe in becoming self-sufficient. He is also openly active in speaking out about homophobia in sport, as well as a variety of other social and political issues, and using his status as a high-profile athlete to convey messages relating to these issues.
I knew just what it had to be when I heard you say what you said to me. Do every do inside. Look like you're working up an appetite for the night. Yeah, get by then I just sat at the back, keeping you out the way you act. Gave a string attack, getting out of line. I'm yanking you back in your place.
The role of the Australian Rugby Union, their respective state bodies, and school rugby programs have been prominent in David Pocock's career. The training programs, right from his early days as a junior to the ones he still participates in with the ACT Brumbies and Wallabies, have all played a significant role in establishing him as one of the world's best rugby players. For Pocock, the opportunities that he has been given and the pathways in which he has followed may not have all been possible were it not for the talent recognition, skill development, and career or player progressions that came with being selected in many age grade teams. Wallet isn't everything to make these age grade teams. And of course, many players are able to play international rugby without having done so. The benefits that these programs expose young athletes to are second to none. As mentioned earlier, although the numbers are increasing of players progressing through pathways from start to finish, it isn't vital to do so. The ARU have been working more and more at ensuring talent is identified and kept within rugby to prevent player exodus to other sports with similar skill sets. Through being able to provide delivery systems whereby players are brought into more professional environments at an earlier age, these numbers can only continue to rise, and more players will fit into the David Pocock mould, in that they have all represented their state from a young age and then their country in schoolboy, under-19 and under-20 levels. Having now read and assessed David Pocock's autobiography, Open Side, My Journey to the Rugby World Cup, I feel as though it's clear that he's aware of the contribution that rugby's delivery systems have made on his career. Overall, I think he recognises areas where he has been provided opportunities that otherwise may not have been given, and he holds a firm knowledge of the benefits of such pathways. Although making age grade representative teams doesn't guarantee you'll play for the Wallabies, having name recognition and a reputation among rugby's elite circles can only be beneficial for career development. Being exposed to elite training programs and pathways at such a young age will benefit overall physical development of a player, as well as game understanding that comes from being at a high level. David Pocock is a prime example of Australian Rugby Union pathways paying off to allow juniors to reach their maximum potential and go on to achieve that ultimate goal of playing for Australia in a Rugby World Cup.